I highlight in my presentation the way the German business is tackling the situation and the challenges of the labor market integration of refugees. And I will also go a little bit into the lessons learned in Germany, as well as the legal obstacles that we still face. Maybe I start with some numbers. Since 2013, we had 1.4 million refugees coming to Germany. Out of those, 2015, well, the last 2 years basically, we had 1.2. So 200,000 in the first 2 years, and then 1.2 million in the last 2 years. And basically, we were not prepared. Our structures in Germany were not prepared for this huge amount of people. And we are still struggling a little bit with it at the moment. It's much improved since sort of new centers have been set up. Flexibility, actually, even though Germany maybe is the country where everybody thinks it's more strict and harder, but they actually did follow a very pragmatic approach after the Chancellor indeed at some point said we will make it. Nevertheless, well, the refugees that came to Germany, the majority of them don't have the skills or the language knowledge that they would need to immediately enter the German labor market. So it requires quite some training and exercise and education to get them to the levels needed. And the integration process, as just shown also from the example in Sweden, is not a fast thing. It will not go fast, no matter what you do. It will take time. So to have people thinking that within 2 or 3 years, it's, you're part of it, you have a job, etc., it's just not realistic. So despite everything, it will take time to qualify people, to get the language skills, etc. So I think this is one of the key messages I really want to convey, that whatever you do, don't expect it to go fast. What we have as a positive point with the refugees coming to Germany is that more than 1/3 of them, at least those registered last year, are actually younger than 18 years old. So they qualify still for vocational education, for normal school education. So for them, the best integration into the labor market is in the education system and through the apprentice system that we have in Germany. And this is also what we are trying to get into. But as said, the lessons learned really is the integration process will take much more time than potentially was expected first. And it is mostly due, well, no surprise here, it sort of confirms all the other research. It's mostly due to language skills, or the lack of them, and the qualifications that do not really match with what the German labor market is seeking at the moment. So, and then now the question remains, how do you get them to work? Because we still see that out of those many people, working age people who came to Germany, so let's say 15 to 60, 19% basically only have a vocational education degree, so it's just a part of them. 13 have a university diploma, 13%. And over 30% never went to any school at all, or left without a diploma, or have just a sort of very low qualification skill. So what is also important, I think, is the integration courses that are being offered at the moment, which don't only provide an understanding, like knowledge, language learning, but also an understanding of the social, cultural sort of context of the country you are coming into. So that's one thing that in surveys that we've done with German companies, it's sort of come up quite often, at least in the beginning, that for people that they try to employ, there was a bit of a mismatch or a misunderstanding of what punctuality rules actually mean, whether they are compulsory or more sort of open to interpretation. So those are sort of, I guess, the sociocultural context that is also important to learn and to also give them as information in integration courses. What other lessons did we learn? The place of residence actually emerged as one element for successful integration. So the refugees, at least many of them in Germany, tend to move to larger cities in Western Germany mostly. I guess because they have the networks there, they know people there, so, and they hope for support. The problem is with the way the German economy is structured. We do have all those what they call like hidden champions or SMEs and companies that need skilled labor or that need labor. They are not in those large cities. They're all spread out all across the country. So having them sort of accumulate in the large cities is actually not very useful in terms of integration into the labor market. Might help in other contexts, but having people to go to, well, smaller cities, Gütersloh or whatever, where we have companies that actually are in need of them, is important. The German labor market is indeed in need of well-skilled labor. So employers are keen to get refugees and to support them in their work. Now maybe to the hurdles. We did as social partner demands to the German government. We sent them basically a list of 13 demands that we find are very important. And the first one is a quick decision on the legal status of the refugee. So that's one of the largest hurdles. Even for vocational education, we have this now called 3+2 rule. So you have 3 years of vocational education plus 2 years that you actually would work for the employer. I'm sure people are familiar with the German dual sort of vocational education system, right? So you go to school at the same time you already work in a company, etc. So which is why employers find it important that while you go to school and already work in the company, it's not only those 3 years while you have the education, and which is also co-funded by the employer, but then that you're also available afterwards for at least 2 years. So we had some discussion with the German government on this. So once somebody's actually granted a place in a vocational education school, and then also has found vocational education place in a company, that not after like half a year they will get some notification from public authorities that their status is changed and they have to return. So the legal certainty about the status is one of is actually the first demand. So and then speeding up the procedure, the same I guess also for your experiences in Sweden, the faster the better, to have the certainty and to be sure that the person that you employ is actually going to stay with you and you do not have to make the initial investments again and again. Making the integration courses compulsory is also something that from an employer's point of view is very, very important. The language skills, obviously, but also, as I said, the other bits and pieces that make up an integration course are very, very important. Easy access to internships is another one that will help with assessing the skills of refugees, depending on what age they are. Also, we have a prohibition, or we used to have a prohibition of 15 months before people were actually allowed to work. The only exception was for those that could already demonstrate that they have very good qualifications, which is sort of contradictory to what we wanted to achieve. So the ones that already had the skills and qualifications, they were the ones that could get an exemption and could start working early. Those who didn't actually had to wait for about 15 months till they were allowed to start any kind of work, self-employed or sort of with a company. So one of the things also companies say when one asks them what is hurdles for them is also there is a lot of initiatives by now There's initiatives on the local level, voluntary ones, together with the government, together with chambers of commerce, etc. So there's a lot of things going on, because along the entire sort of chain, authorities have understood that there needs to be more action. But often this information is not readily available to companies. So what companies regularly say is, what we really want to have is one person we can turn to in our region, especially sort of small and medium-sized companies. We want to have one person who really sort of knows the in and outs of all those legal changes that are happening, the sort of different rules that apply to somebody coming from Ukraine as opposed to somebody coming from Afghanistan or Syria. Otherwise, to a company that has like none or very small HR department, to always go through this red tape, it's just way too demanding. They're not going to do this. So they basically say, we want to have one person with the Chamber of Commerce, with the City Council, whatever it might be, that we can turn to, and this person will help us also tell us if there's any funding programs, of which there are many. We see a lot. Bavaria, for instance, has set up a program worth 6.7 million, trying to help to integrate refugees into the labor market. But then, what are the rules? I'm a small company. I'm a small business. I'm not going to read thousands and thousands of pages in order to be able to maybe employ to refugees, although I might want to. So to have somebody who helps me negotiate all that is very important, and then companies are ready to engage and are also willing to help in addressing this challenge, and also in integrating people. And I guess that companies also understand and see that integrating them into the labor market goes a long way in integrating them into society in general, after all. So I was shorter, I guess, than other people, also given that I don't have a presentation. But if you have any questions, then we can get going into this. Thank you.